All righty, Coop, let's talk, man. Give me a little bit about your background. I've seen your stuff. You do two unique things that I see is the biomechanics, and the way I see it is it's integrative. It's in a jargon I can understand and the people can understand. You also talk about a little bit of nutrition. So kind of talk to me about kind of how that all started or what that all means.
Yeah, so I basically it kind of started because it followed my own curiosity. Like that's at least where I've landed, where I'm at now.
Yeah.
And I think like a lot of folks, I started in mainstream health and fitness, and then uh, moving forward based off that, I've gradually learned more about performance, and then again, kind of stuck in like main paradigms, and then pretty early on, at least compared to most folks, I decided to seek out, who I thought was doing the best job with athletes. So that meant sort of people like Nick Curson with Speed of Sport, the Marinovich training family. I was like, that's kind of going viral now, but I was like one of the, first handful of folks to kind of like learn from that training family. And then like I would say second gen, I guess, just based on how long they've been around. And then also other disciplines too. I've kind of always taken an approach of like, well, this system might have something I could use, right? Whether it's functional patterns, PRI, um, DNS, go to all kinds of different stuff people might have heard of, maybe not your super lay person, but at least your other coaches. But yeah, I kind of built my own quilt based on that. I've tried to stay mostly principle based. I've learned directly from a lot of these outfits or people. And then I feel like it's helped me serve a unique blend of people. Like over the years, I've started in general fitness, and then I've since worked with everybody from pro athletes and Olympians. So, obviously, student athletes going to be like the bulk, or collegiate, high school, and younger. That's the bulk of, what you're going to see on a day to day. Of course, the pros I mentioned, and then, even younger. And then everyday folks, people with chronic conditions, all kinds of stuff. So I basically marry that biomechanics based training background, although I don't want to say it's only biomechanics. It's more just
Sure.
feel like it gets called that because I don't neglect that.
All right.
I'm
All
still
right.
doing like, you want to always as a trainer do kinetics, kinematics, right? You want to do the movement piece. You also want to do the like output based stuff, speed, velocity, power, all that kind of stuff too. So I am doing all that kind of stuff. It's more just kind of doing both. And I marry that performance and rehab with integrative health and nutrition, taking a bioenergetics based approach.
Yeah, I mean, it's good stuff. I think like what I've seen from you is great because I've seen some of the GOTA stuff, and I think I forgot who quoted it, but it's like it's just as bad or just as good to take it as is. Like it's just as bad to say this is bad, or it's just as bad as to say this is really good. This is it, right? And I think it's cool to see someone that like takes the good from GOTA and implements some of that stuff. I think it's great. Like I do something similar where I see something cool, I'm going to take what I can use and discard what I don't use. So I don't think like any systems inherently good or bad. I think it's there's bits and pieces of it that I can take and make it my own a little bit. I've seen that with you, so that's pretty cool as well.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, I know you're kind of more training agnostic. I think a lot of times these systems can get into trying to, and their followers can get into trying to prove that a system works rather than saying, all right, what are the pros and cons, right? Like a PRI might be the correct lens through which to see a lot of you know, neuro and structural things, but maybe on the applied side, so one of these other disciplines can answer some of those questions, or just some PRI practitioners are better at solving those conceptual problems than others, right?
Right.
Same thing with GOTA. I don't know how in the weeds you want to go, how educated your audience
Yeah.
is, but with GOTA, it's like they're great for getting, so if you're doing the drop-ins right with the kind of the big toe inside edge of the foot, press down, you're getting really good tibial femoral rotation and getting those
Hmm.
micro muscles to pull these bony alignments into proper position. What they would refer to in lay terms as like a gyroscope of the leg
Yep.
rotating, everything rotating kind of in unison versus maybe this is internally rotated and your tibia is externally rotated, like you see in some folks. They're good at strengthening the foot. They're good at getting relative, internal and external rotation in their corrective exercises. But the limitation there would be like, if you look at a lot of their before and afters, everybody's center of mass is super pushed forward.
Right. Right. Right.
it's there's nothing wrong with a little anterior pelvic tilt, especially in like forward locomotive athletes, like and if it's not causing pain or super drastic. But your average person actually has trouble, and a lot of these change of direction athletes, they also would benefit from and have trouble finding their heels and orienting their center of mass backwards. So
Right.
it's you don't want to be stuck in any paradigm. I don't want to do all heels down training
Right.
outside of my sport necessarily, but there are people who spend so much time, they're so forefoot driven, their feet are plenty quote unquote
Yeah.
strong, even if they don't have movement options in the foot. They might need to do bias a lot more heels back.
Right.
And I think again, your average person and even athlete is probably going to walk and breathe with their neck and back, like PRI would say. So if you're doing all GOTA stuff, you're just really like pushing that center of mass forward, which can interrupt braking abilities, and being able to orient your center of mass back is part and partial for that, part and parcel for that. Excuse me. And I think go to some of those positions can be redone with the heel down. I think the ones that are like more forefoot driven are really good for restoring propulsion with integrity and can serve as a good corrective or warm up lead in exercise for like sprinters and things like that. But I think that's more supplemental.
Right.
I don't think that on the applied side they should be looked at as a training system unto themselves. And
Right.
that's not me dissing them, by the way. I
Sure.
look at most training systems as supplemental.
Right.
Um, and I don't really think we need to get into these sort of like civil wars either in this community. I think that, it's okay to disagree with someone and not hate them
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
dislike.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And you and I are going to have differences in our approaches, right? But we're cool.
Right.
So it's like
Right.
I think also like the more these systems can be open-minded, the more they would learn from one another. And
Right.
again, I don't want to. That was one example. I don't know if your main audience is coaches or not, or if this is
Yeah.
going to go over everyday people's heads. But I am
Certainly.
happy to talk about strengths and weaknesses of other systems too.
Yeah.
Jay Schroeder and those spin-offs, the Marinovich training system and those spin-offs, like whatever you want to talk about, I'm happy to kind of like, you
Yeah.
know,
I've been just seeing, yeah, it's like no, it's kind of like that example of like heels, no heels. Like you need components of both, right? Like sometimes if you can't connect to getting your hips back or, a little hinge position, you might need more heel for that, right? Or you might need more ground or more heel to connect to a muscle better, right? So I think it's important to do both those things. Like, so I think it's cool that you're able to understand how to break down some of these systems and how it works for you. Like you said, people turn into my system, your system. Let's fight and clash, and that doesn't benefit anybody because now you just pick this system instead of just doing what's right. Like for you, I've seen it seems like you're just acquiring more tools, and the more tools you have, the better you're able to solve any problem now because you're able to go to with an unbiased approach. You're able to go to PRI with an unbiased approach, right? So I think it's just cool to see some of that stuff. Was there like a point that you realized like, oh, um, did you study one system? Did you ever like study one system and did only that system for a while, and then at some point you realize, oh, I need some of this too? Like, where did Coop get all that from?
Yeah, I think early on, whenever we're all in like the mainstream, most of us start in the mainstream, you're kind of doing that. We're all kind of doing just the traditional stuff for the most part at one point.
Yeah,
I then learned kind of more the like Marinovich training system, a little bit of PRI stuff actually early on. So I kind of always had a value for personal, like placed a value on corrective exercise, even if I was doing some of it was good, some of it was like mindless mobility, as I call it, pails and rails kind of shit stuff,
yeah,
just
yeah,
stuff that's like baby's first functional training or mobility. And did do some useful PRI stuff. And then I would say the first like full system I kind of adopted after that was the Marinovich training system. I didn't only, and the Jay Schroeder Evo Sport training system. And I sort of biased those heavy in the people I was working with. Not everybody, because like I was still, working with general fitness clients too. But I would say I had my head up the ass of those systems pretty firmly at one point, and then it's interesting for me to like kind of see the shift now, where it's like at that time, like I was getting pretty criticized for being on the forefront. I still do a lot of that stuff, but um, now it's kind of come back around again and it's gone more viral, and I see people doing sometimes like solid executions of it, sometimes kind of bastardized versions of it, and even the ones that are really good, they tend to talk about that system, the Marinovich training system or the Jay Schroeder one, as kind of all knowing. and like it's sort of black magic or voodoo and above all else. And like I just having been on that side of things, like I get it. It's so advanced in some ways. You're so and unique. You're so fully entrenched in it that you just can't see what your blind spots are. But then the older that I've gotten, I guess, with more experience that I've gotten, I could say like I just don't do that with any system anymore like I once did, right? Like so, Jay Schroeder has some great concepts about absorbing force and producing force and position and things like that, but it's not always with the most like complete biomechanical or kinematic based concept behind it. Marv had a better appreciation for that kind of stuff. He probably had more types of athletic patterns he would do, little more appreciation for biomechanics, but maybe lacked some of the strength qualities that Jay Schroeder was okay leaning into. And um, Marv's stuff also now, like I still use a lot of it, but like a lot of the ball work kind of stuff, it's almost like its utility is that some of the instability teaches you body control and like improves some level of sensory motor awareness, which can improve your movement abilities. But at the same time, um, it's lacking the right kind of like biomechanical sort of like context. It's lacking a lot of corrective exercise to put people in the right alignments before they do this crazy athletic stuff.
Right,
So
right.
it's a little bit cart before horse in some ways. Marv understood, had an appreciation. He changed his nutrition like later on, but like Gavin from Sports Science Lab, um, Mike Maddox, who invented the accelerating isokinetic machine, then known as the jumper, they kind of introduced Marv to some of the more bioenergetic nutritional concepts, even though he was on the zone earlier on. And so Marv understood nutrition better than Jay, whereas a lot of Jay's guys, it was all super maximal intensity, and they were doing it on like a low carb and
Oh
still
gosh.
on a
Yeah.
low carb, yeah, on a low carb, almost no carb diet. So those are just a few examples of popular systems. I think
So why do you think you mentioned earlier like it's kind of like gets bastardized or messed up now? Why do you think that is? Is it because people are just like lacking like back in when you learned, when I learned, you have to take time. Like, you think part of it is that like I can just kind of Google this answer, watch a quick video. I'm not doing the deep learning. Like why do you think that is?
I again, I don't really know. I mean, I don't know if it's like your average person, I think, isn't maximizing their cognitive function, even if they're highly intelligent. It takes energy to kind of care about this stuff.
Yeah.
Um, or have empathy, all that kind of stuff. It takes biological energy, as Dr. Ray Pete would say. So could be just that. It's sort of easier to plug and play a system than it is to really think through it.
Hmm.
And then I think, yeah, it's just everything like is easier in a package deal, whether it's F45 for your average person, it's just like, oh, okay, let
Yeah.
me check my box,
Yeah.
um, do my drive-through like fast food of training. But
Right.
I think trainers can be the same way. They have a really positive experience with a system or an aspect of it, and then they maybe become closed off. Not everybody, but certainly some.
Right. Yeah, I think I see it more with nutrition. I know you talked about that stuff earlier. Um, I know you mentioned stuff with like carbs before, and some people like cut them out completely. Kind of talk to me about your nutrition stuff that you go over. I know some of it's kind of unique. Some of it is pretty good stuff that the stuff we know. Kind of talk to me about like how you learned all that stuff. It's some good stuff out there.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of like an anthropologist in that department too. I learned a lot of mainstream nutritional concepts initially, a lot of the like bodybuilding kind of stuff,
Yeah.
physique stuff where you're like maybe able to look good but not be at your peak health wise. And then I've learned, I kind of like had some like health, not, capital H health issues, but I was not functioning at an optimal state following that advice eventually.
Hmm.
And that was at a young age, like mid 20s, early to mid 20s. And then so it kind of led me down a more ancestral path, which can mean a lot of things, granted, but we'll just say it's more like a little bit more of an integrative based approach to nutrition. And that resolved a lot of like things I was dealing with at the time, whether it was pain or just cognitive and emotional processing, things like that, energy, physique. And then Eventually, I found my way to like fasting and keto after that. And then, moving forward, found from there, a guy by the name of Dan Dixon introduced me to kind of more of a bioenergetic approach to nutrition and Dr.
Is
Ray
that is that
Peat.
the guy that does the electro stuff? Is that the same Dixon or is that somebody else?
It's the same guy, yeah. So
Yeah.
Dan is a co-owner of the company New X Technologies.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
I have a New Fit, which is a
yeah,
similar like signal, just a
yeah.
different company. You both are great. Obviously, I have the New Fits. It's a stronger kind of. I mean, it can go up to more hertz and have more channels and all that, but both are great. And yeah, that's the same Dan. So he
Okay.
introduced me to. I was introduced to that, I think, on my own research, and then Dan kind of like brought it back around. And I'm definitely not perfectly aligned with that camp either. It's kind of the theme of the day, but mostly aligned if I had to say anything. And I think taking a bioenergetic approach to nutrition and health and performance is kind of the right lens because at the end of the day, everything from thinking, like us talking here now, to like muscle, like firing and wiring, and your body sort of self-regulating its immune systems, hormonal systems, all that, everything going on under the hood. It takes biological energy, right? It takes ATP.
Right. So with that, is there like certain concepts of this nutrition stuff that we may be missing based on what we do in the modern diet that you see?
Yeah. You're just saying where do we have blind spots in
Yeah, like what
the
do we buy? I know like the stuff I've been reading lately. I got to do more research. That's like light, right? Like you want to kind of eat to light. I don't know how true this. I haven't done enough, but like your body seems to process things better with the sunlight, right? So I should be eating at certain times, and is there blind spots that we're missing because we're eating cereal or Starbucks? Like, is there anything there that you see?
Yeah. I mean, just if you want to start with your like average person, then they're eating a lot more inflammatory agents and things not meant for human consumption. And I guess if you had to put it simply, like they've got too much red in their bank account and not enough green, whether you want to talk light, sleep, whatever. Like your average person has way more like not enough green coming through their diet, right? In terms of ATP and biological energy being produced. And they've got a lot more biological insults coming their way through inflammation through the diet, which causes you to lose energy systemically. Maybe things that have a little bit of nutrients in there, but could be somewhere in between a hard no junk and then health stuff maybe that lives over here that might have some nutrients, but might take so much work to digest. Things like legumes, lentils, certain vegetables, nuts, stuff that like might be considered like that's kind of a pseudo health food, or something that people like. It's okay to have, but certainly maybe there's a misconception around, oh, I need to base a lot of my diet around that stuff. There's stuff
Right,
like
right.
that too that I think your average, even health conscious person makes. But that's kind of my framework for nutrition. Like, of course, we can take this a million ways. Oh, why low carbs bad? Why veganism is bad? Like, why all this stuff is not optimal. But at the end of the day, like, if your diet's not maximizing the amount of like energy it can produce, and it's based on philosophy, like keto is, or like plant-based is, then it's not really objective, right? It's like technically more on the religious or theoretical side where I've tried to using there's a guy named like Ronnie Smith, yet he's offline, he was never online, but he had a business called Energy Concepts, and he
Mm,
was like a bioenergetic and Dr. Ray Peat student. And he would talk a lot about just energy density of food. And he had like a system that was digestion, absorption, utilization, right? If I can digest a food super efficiently and basically process it well, I'm going to be able to absorb the value of those nutrients. So
yeah.
I kind of took that and I created what I believe is the first attempt, at least, still technically a theory, but first attempt at objectivity in nutrition. And that's where everything is on kind of a spectrum, and you have foods that are highly energy or nutrient dense and take almost no work to digest, things
Right.
like collagen, maybe like certain types of like meat, things like that, like let's say like wild caught shellfish, things like ruminant organ meats, things that are like fall in that spectrum. And then on this end is like bullshit you never want to eat, like
Right.
junk
Right.
food
Right.
kind of stuff, artificial stuff, like that kind of thing. And then there's this nebulous here of things that are kind of center left, at least for where
Hmm.
I'm looking, center left.
Sure.
Um, and that might include some things like potato, sweet potato, and whatever else, rice, where like, yeah, healthy, robust individuals should be able to have that, extract what nutrients it has, and be good. Um, but a less healthy person with suboptimal gut function and maybe less energy availability and flow overall might have trouble there. And that's
Yeah.
why a lot of these things like an egg allergy and stuff like that is really not a permanent fixture the same way like a peanut allergy could be for someone. They can be transient. It's not a destiny. And then there's this center right, like bad, but not horrible. And that's going to be things like certain vegetables. This is where the carnivore people tend, and Dr. Stephen
Yeah.
Gundry
Yeah.
tend to have a point, right? Like
They pull from that.
but instead of going no veggies or no fruit or whatever, like fruit's over here too, by the way. We say, all right, well, maybe some vegetables like raw carrots, bamboo shoots, white button mushrooms, like maybe some of this stuff has function and is good, but maybe some of this stuff, yes, it does have an digestible fiber. I'm not getting able to really absorb the nutrients in there, so on and so forth, right? There's context. And then there's things like
Right.
I mentioned before, nuts, a lot of grains, maybe,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff where it's like, okay, if I'm out at a restaurant, I get a little bit of it in, cool,
Fine.
whatever, here and
Right.
there, as long as I'm a robust enough individual, but, not a total hell no, like this kind of stuff
Right.
here.
It's not gonna wreck you if you ate some raw broccoli, sometimes at the restaurant, right? That's what you're saying.
It shouldn't. I mean, yeah,
Right. Right.
if you're a robust individual, it should not, right? Like
Right.
I get a little wheat and gluten like here and there cross contamination if I have a little acai bowl or something. And even if I don't,
Right.
the granola is not something I would keep in my own home to make on the daily. It is something that I should be able to have and it not ruin my weekend,
Right.
right?
Right. 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 Yeah.
Like it would for some.
I like the mention of robustness. Yeah, you want to be over here, your left, my right, be as good as you can. But your body, if it's optimal, it should be robust enough to handle some of that stuff that's not on the complete other side. Like you should be fine with it, right? So it shouldn't
Yeah,
wreck your deal. I remember
yeah.
something you mentioned about coffee, about what to drink or what to consume along with your coffee. Like, do you see any things that people do with coffee that might be not as optimal?
Coffee.
Yeah. Was it
Coffee
honey?
is
Was that honey that you said to drink with coffee? I don't remember what it was exactly.
yeah. So if you drink coffee on its own, it can cause cortisol, like adrenaline hormone kind of issues. But if you're taking it with, let's say mixed with some type of like good quality milk, or you're mixing in raw honey or a little bit of maple syrup or molasses, or you're just simply having some fruit with with the meal, and then the coffee can be black, right? Like
Mm.
if it's like that, you should be able to tolerate it pretty well. And I think a
Oh,
good indicator of liver function is how well someone, it's been shown how well someone tolerates coffee. So sometimes your coffee intolerance might have to do more with how much you're consuming,
yeah. Yeah.
where is it sourced, and the quality, which can be
Yeah.
anything, right? Meat included. What are you having it with? And then just what's your own health status, right? Like, I think those are all important kind of factors here.
Right. So, 'cause it might not, like you said, it might not be the coffee itself, but the type of coffee you're getting. You're not getting the fair trade stuff or whatever, right? So I think that's good. That's important. Um, yeah, I think it's cool to learn about that. So I just got put on to like Ray Pete a little bit here or there on X. I've been
Oh
just seeing
yeah,
his stuff with the
there we go.
carrots. He has like a carrot salad or something. So it's cool to hear that name kind of pop up. I was super unfamiliar with it because that's like nutrition's like the last thing that I do. Typically, you know. But I think it's cool because for someone like you not only have you studied it and you do study it, is that you've done some of this stuff too. I think that's important too. Like obviously that can't be your only reason that you did keto and tell people not to do it or to do it, but I think it's important to have gone through some of those experiences for yourself. I think there's sometimes what I see people lack, like, they've only gone through the experience, so they're gonna make you do keto, or they had or they haven't done it at all and they tell you about it. I think it's so good to just simply do a little bit of that.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, there is, on that spectrum, there is like obviously it leaves room for individual like health status, right? Like something
Right,
that's center left for you and me might be not quite for
right,
someone operating a lower capacity health wise. And that's why it's sort of like it's relative, And there are things on there that are nuanced, like dairy, for example, like where Where's it coming from? Has a person been off dairy and lost the enzymes to kind of metabolize it? Is one possibility that's been thrown around. Different dairies produce things differently. Some people can maybe not have milk from A and tolerate it as well as they can B.
Right.
Uh, do you need to back off and fully like almost like rehabilitation? You have early stage rehab. Is it so tough that you need to kind of do, sheep or goat, or do you need to go full blown like condensed powdered milk, right? On top of the enzymes, like, or is it simply a matter of you do okay with raw milk or goat's milk, but maybe not okay with like regular cow's milk quite yet? So even some of this center left stuff is like there's room for, bio individuality there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So what's some of this stuff? Do you recommend like an elimination diet, or do you tell people to go take a gut test? Like, what are some things that like, where do I start with all this? Journaling.
I have a
I'm
pretty
stuff.
panoramic health intake that I do with folks that starts
Okay.
with a questionnaire. And if someone has, or like I work with whatever info you have, right? So if someone already has labs that are recent enough or any other kind of forms of self quantification, we'll look at that,
Yeah.
right? We'll look at that. And, or if they want to get it done, I can help them get set up to get it done, get diagnostics done. However, you don't need it, right? Because I like some people, it's like they may not be able to afford that. And instead of saying like, well, shrugging, I try to help everybody as best I can. And
Yeah.
so what we want to do in those cases is like, if someone wants to work with me, like who's listening, it's like we just need to like we might just do with the health intake component and like a consultation. And then I'm going to recommend stuff that's like what's known as generally prescriptive. And what I mean by that is like we don't need labs to know if proper sleep is good for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
don't need labs to show if like certain foods are going to have nutrient density.
Yeah.
We might, like, if we're going to do a more hormonal intervention or something more specific and targeted that might have biological consequences if it's not a match for your own physiology, then yeah, that's something that like it might be more important to have like labs for, right? But there's even sometimes like thyroid tests, metabolic tests you could do at home,
Yeah.
that are a lot more useful and accurate and like kind of serve as like a screening than some would think, right? It's like, okay, well, we can do some of this stuff. Oh, and if there's a little bit of a check engine light here, maybe then we layer in some like specific metrics or labs after that if it's like, you know, concerning enough,
Yeah.
but the lion's share of people I work with are either, doing something simple like doing just a simple nutrition consult with me, doing a nutrition program and maybe don't have access to a lot of that and we're working just off the intake. Some folks are also reading my sports nutrition manual,
Yeah.
adaptive nutrition, and doing a DIY version. So there's a lot of different ways. I've always tried to like have an
Yeah.
option that scales relative to the individual and their own, financial capabilities.
Yeah. I think it's important, like you said, to do it yourself. I think people just like they might see someone like you and say, "Give me the answer." Like there has to be a lot of like thought or journaling to figure out what works for this person. It's not as simple as like, "Hey, Coop, hey, Choi, give me a diet." Right? There's so much to it. It can be very nuanced, but I think like it's very important to have whether even for like training, like like you need someone who's active in their training journey, right? They can't just come
Right.
in the twice a week or three times a week, even with you, and expect it all, right? Like you have to be able to communicate or program out for them, right? So I
Yeah.
think it's just more the more active the client is, the better off they're going to be, whether it's training or nutrition.
I think so. The more, I mean, you got to be a participant in your own journey. And even if you're busy, like if you're very busy and that's tough to do, then it's probably even more important for you to do
Yeah,
kind of one of the more longer, like nutritional, like kind of like programs where I'm teaching a man or teaching a woman to fish and trying to create a PhD client and treat it as sort of an accelerator or an incubator so that like it's easy enough for you to implement. I'm worrying about all that on the back end. So you can just get started with, hey, what do I eat, dude? And when do I eat it? And then throughout the process, through you asking me questions, through me like teaching you enough about your own body, by the end of it, like my goal is to hand you the keys to your own car, if you will, and you can do it for yourself moving forward. Like my goal with everybody I work with, that's sort of a built-in level of cost effectiveness too, is I try to make it so you only need one program, right? Training, I think you always need some level of guidance. But
right.
nutrition, I think I can teach him most stuff. If if we're working together for 3 to 6 months, and then after that, again, you know how to do it, and you don't really need me as much anymore. So it makes it an investment. You get a ton of ROI on, not only because you get your upfront results, but also um, you're like I can impart all this onto you. And then maybe what people do is like once a year or something, they might tap me on the shoulder for a one-off consult, like in like an hour consult, in case the science has changed or their situation's changed, and I can, give them a little update and like send them on their way.
Yeah.
Um, I think also like someone like yourself, I could probably do just a one-off nutrition consultation with your starting points better in terms of education than most people, and I could be like, hey, like, maybe we do another one in the future, but like instead of doing this whole 12-week, 6 month thing, take this stuff and run with it, right? And then you even have like, let's say it's a college student who couldn't even afford that or whatever. Not that it's much or anything, but they can kind of do the self starter, and they maybe at the time they're not like have a family or anything. Like they might do well with the nutrition manual, adaptive nutrition, or book,
Right.
really, but it's also serves as a manual. Um, but yeah, and then I have coaches that do the same. Like they just want to like learn for their own purposes. So
Right.
even if they're not doing the mentorship, they'll opt to just have you treat them like a full blown client. It's like, hey, I'm a trainer, but like I want to offer this service to my clients and better serve my people.
Right. Right. So with this stuff, you obviously teach it to coaches, you teach it to athletes and clients. What about you? Do you ever like, is there a way that you check in with somebody for this stuff, or do you ever fall off and know that you're falling off, or check other ways that Coop's falling off? Like, what do you do with kind of with your own stuff?
Fall off in my own nutrition or my own
Yeah.
knowledge of learning.
Your nutrition, yeah. I mean, well, I guess
Uh,
we can talk about that too. Your knowledge of learning. How do you find time? Do you schedule an hour a week? Do you schedule, every other week? Like, how do you do all that stuff? So
yeah,
one, nutrition. How do you take care of that? And two, how do you kind of schedule your own learning? Because you're obviously reading something.
yeah. I think with my own nutrition, I can kind of just self monitor at this point and decide if I need to add a little of this, a little less of that, tweak something based on my activity level, maybe add more activity, maybe add more food to match my activity level. Um, if I went off, I mean, I never go off, but like, if I'm on a vacation and maybe I like don't have as much control of variables, like I'm not sweating, not being my peak, but like I also know what to do to get back to it. So I kind of just, I do that. I put as much effort in to it. Like I put a lot of thought into kind of being just optimally healthy, but not to the point of like biohacker level neuroticism, because I don't really see the point in, this like hyper like I mean I
So,
want to add life to my years. Very important to me that I do things that like improve that and don't
yeah.
compromise that. But I also want to like add years, there should be not just years to my life, but I want to add life to my years, right?
Right. Right.
I don't want to like spend 50 years not living my life just
Right.
so I can, spend 5 more years not living my life, right? Like
Yeah.
there's levels to it. I think, I trend way more in the on it direction than your average person, obviously. But like,
Right.
I still will drink alcohol here or there once in a blue moon, right? Like, I still, if I'm out with my girlfriend and she wants to try something, like, I'm not, I'm willing to try it as long as it's not like something like total kind of, I just don't
Sure.
feel like it.
Right.
So there's that kind of stuff, right? And, but anyways, like, I kind of just self monitor like how I feel physique, do my own self quantification. I just did labs, for instance. Um, and then for my own knowledge, I actually like, and this also is kind of what comes into like how I mentor other coaches is like, I, I got into this to do it for the love of the game, right? Like it was so following my own natural curiosity and, at the time obsession that like, and passion is probably a better word, that like I would just be relentless with research, calling and talking to other practitioners in the space, learning from them, shadowing that like I didn't always nurture the business side and the communication, the marketing and that side of things. So like I don't I'm nobody special. I'm still learning. Absolutely. There's a lot of great people I still learn from. But right now it's more maybe like, oh, this person has this concept I can pull from, this nutritional concept that I need to really brush up on. I think I'm very principle based and maybe quote unquote ahead of your average practitioner in that way.
Yeah.
Again, nobody special, just comparing it to baseline, because I just come from that relentless. background where like my 10,000 hour rule is like, it's going to supersede your average trainer. I don't at the present time have like kids or anything, I don't have like
Right.
kids. So it's like
Right.
I do have a business to run, but like I'd historically had enough time to do that. Um, and so it's easier for me. I always trend toward like they say you do things for my friend Dr. Paulo Philly, he's a chiropractor who also mentors practitioners in his field. He says, and I think I don't know where the origin of this is, but people are like driven by one of a few things, right? It's
Hmm.
going to be finance, it's going to be passion, right? Like for the love of the game, if you will.
Yeah.
It's going to be maybe like travel or lifestyle design, and it's going to be social. People maybe choose a career path to like meet a spouse, or they like event work, event centered work because of connecting with others, right?
Yeah.
I definitely came in historically on the like for the love of the game, and I thought I was just going to be the nicest trainer, and then people have business going to take care of itself, right? I'll be sought after, and to some extent, it can work like that. That is the most important skill to have.
Right.
However, you can't neglect the other aspects, which are the business, and then like the back end stuff, like your tax classification, the stuff that ain't fun, right? The like
Right. Right.
your website, your back end billing system, like maintaining good business boundaries, all that kind of stuff. And then there's also your marketing and communication. How do you position yourself? How do you articulate what you do? Not just literal marketing. And then so now, I'll help coaches with all those things. But that's a long way of answering your question. Like, how do I stay on my own learning? I just
Yeah.
trend towards it because that's
Yeah.
what I'm motivated by. And so I had to kind of like dial in these other areas and not be as go as hand here, knowing that I would still be reasonably ahead if I like kind of put a little more love into these areas for a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the same way for me. Like I kind of got into the field late. I finished my undergrad in communications, and I'm like, I
Same,
want to do this
same.
somehow. Yeah. So
Yeah,
it was funny you said that. I was like, so yeah, my background was PR, so I have a little bit of the copywriting stuff, which is kind of nice, and it's helped a lot. Like I think that's. I mean, I'm biased, but I think the best people who do this field are the ones who don't originally like they didn't get a kines degree, right? I think sometimes when you have a kines degree, you're just so blindfolded you don't see anything else, like you don't see other ways, right? Or like
right.
we learn things
Right.
like reframing, other things, right? So I think it's so almost better in some ways. But yeah, I think I get that reading because I'm like I have to like catch up sometimes, and I still feel that I'm like, dude, I'm supposed to know this. I didn't know that thing. So I always felt like when I got in, I gotta catch up. I was reading like weird stuff too, like not just research, but like T Nation, Stack, like some of the
Yeah,
music stuff. So that's
full
funny.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think the education that I had, I realized I was passionate about this stuff while I was pursuing that degree, and it actually served me because I can I feel like having the background in that helps me understand and articulate what is going on.
Right.
Whereas if I had my head up the ass of like kinesiology the whole time, I might have been taught some outdated stuff, even if some of the foundational biological principles could be correct, but the applied side may not have been. And then I
Yeah.
would have been thinking about this one thing for years instead of being able to think a little more like kind of interdisciplinary or whatever, pulling different things together. And some cultures actually value that, right? Some
Right.
cultures, I can't remember if it was like kind of Russian, like science and health or things like that. They actually are open to people with, art degrees or finance degrees
Mm,
getting into other fields because they might see things and understand things from a different perspective. I think creatives tend to understand science pretty well sometimes too, even if it's not always their personal passion,
yeah.
if they're exposed to it and have that like passion to learn it. It can be a double-edged sword though. You can have these like market disruptors from tech try to come into health with a wearable. Then you're like, all right, bro, like it
Right.
ain't. So that could
Right.
be a bad thing too. But I do think it is possible for it to work out real well. And I think that the two of us hopefully
Yeah.
are examples of that.
Yeah. I think it's have you read the book Range from Epstein? So he talks about like people
No.
who people like he pretty much just talks about like having a broad range of skills tend to be better because you're not so myopic. And he also talks about like a lot of people who specialize later in their career tend to be better. So in some ways we specialize later in our career because we didn't start this field at 18 in a lot of ways. So
No.
like so
I
so
mean,
they kind of talk about that. So it kind of goes along with like sports too, right? You have a 7-year-old specialized in baseball, he's going to miss out on developing certain skill sets. So now by the time he's 18, he didn't do certain ways to track the ball or make throws because the other kid plays other sports. Like you just miss out on things.
yeah. For sure. I definitely see the parallel there.
Yeah, so it's just kind of cool that like to see that you have a similar background, right? So that's cool. Because I want to ask like one more thing about training. Do you with all the movement stuff that you do? I know you're not just a biomechanics guy. But does that stuff you do kind of year round and then you periodize off of that? Does that also change based on what we're doing? If it's like a hypertrophy phase or speed and power phase, like how do you integrate all that movement stuff into like maybe the tissue building stuff?
Yeah, or like just output based stuff, speed, all that. Well, some of it can be correctives and like a lead in or warm up within a session.
Mhm.
Um, and that can be something that's present year round.
Right.
Uh, I think if someone's in it, like I think the things that change more based on the season, and obviously, like I think it goes without saying, if someone's like rehabbing something, like they're gonna need to do more of that kind of stuff, and maybe like they're gonna build to do more like graded motor patterns eventually on the output based side of things. But let's just assume clean bill of health ish, um, in season, out of season, like I kind of take an approach like Todd Wright from the Clippers in that sense. We have some different disciplines. I have learned the Gary Gray stuff too, but we definitely have some differences there in terms of kind of who we've learned from. But
Mhm.
I like him a lot. I respect him. I do some of that stuff, and I think conceptually he's right about a lot. I think there's
Yeah.
actually some parallels there with functional patterns too, but whether they each want to admit it or not. But
Right, right. I mean, because I've I've studied from a lot of these people, and they're all saying the same. They're all saying the same thing.
in some, at
I'm like,
least
oh my
there's
God.
some kind of
Right,
overlap too, right?
right, right. Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times the output based stuff may change more in and out of season. If someone is in season and they're an athlete who gets meaningful minutes, like let's say starters minutes or like in a pretty dependable rotation slot, then we might peel back on athletic patterns and a lot of the tendon driven elastic loading stuff in season. And we might do more functional strength and control patterns, as Dr. Pat Davidson would say, or like, mobility doesn't
Mhm.
necessarily mean anything, but like corrective and mobility drills. Um, because that's what they need and that's what they're not getting through their sport. If I spam athletic stuff all year round, they're going to get hurt, or at least
Right.
have pain more often than not. And then in the off season, we can get after it, right? Assuming that they're, taking the time to get themselves a proper off season now and then with like AAU basketball or some of these
Yeah.
sports. Like
Yeah.
you have to pick pockets and windows throughout the year instead of
Right.
like,
And
you
whole
know,
you don't have a whole 12. You may not have a whole 12-week off season with them. You might get 3 weeks, 2 weeks.
no, and I know that's a problem that's kind of like become the business of youth sports is like it
Right.
comes at the expense of the robustness of their and the health of their bodies, right? They're getting more
Right.
injured. They're like doing able to, they're not as like physically capable as they once were.
Right. Yeah. So I'm sure that's very hard. Like I know, for me, sometimes I get an athlete for 2 weeks. I'm not doing anything for 2 weeks, or I mean, I don't mind if they're transitioning to a different sport. I think it'd be great, but a lot of times they're just transitioning to the same sport again.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's one thing if it's like two different sports, albeit hopefully one that doesn't take away
Right.
from your first sport.
Right. Yeah.
I think it's just I more rest and more time to develop the body is what your average student athlete's gonna need, whether that's college, whether that's high school, whether that's junior high. Like
Yeah.
I'm not saying what you and I do is more important than literally getting reps in and playing. I'm just saying that your average athlete is going to skew so far in that direction
Right.
that it's probably going to be one of those things that, most of them could stand to benefit from,
Right.
um, a more balanced approach, right?
Yeah. I think it's hard. Like you said, it's not. Yeah. We're not the sport coach, and we're not directly helping them get minutes. But if you're a little beat up and you need to take the time off, it's hard because I think whether you're a parent who has a kid doing this, it's a money thing, right? They're selling you something. And for people like us, whether we're going to learn, yeah, they're teaching us something, but it's also like there's a business behind it, right? So we have to understand that we're all being sold at something in some capacity, right? For good, for better or for worse.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's just you're not going to be your best at like as an athlete unless you're doing a well-rounded approach,
Right.
like doesn't matter how good your motor skills are. Like football, they understand it because it's more of a raw athleticism based sport for the most part.
Yeah.
Um, quarterbacks are the ones that have to have the most amount of motor skills or have to have a deep bag, if you will.
Yeah.
But basketball is notorious for ducking. I'm not saying everything that gets done in your average weight room is productive. It ain't. But
Right.
the basketball players are the ones that tend to have the like they tend to just want to spam playing and skill, and they don't. If anybody, any sport's going to like duck getting proper strength and conditioning, it's tends to be them, at least in who I work with the most. I
Yeah.
work, I
Yeah.
work with baseball, I work with MMA, I work with
Yeah.
volleyball, softball, like everything. But the two mains are basketball and football.
Yeah.
Just, general people too. But the two mains are basketball, football.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've seen that as like a recurrent theme, and I think people need to realize like AEU, there's a lot of phenomenal individuals,
Right.
coach
Right.
involved, hands down. I'm friends with a lot of them, but
Yeah.
and in high school and college too. However, the entity of some of these things like AU or even some of the public sector stuff at schools, private schools, like it's become kind of a like more business, and the schools have
Mhm.
got like found ways around like seeing these kids more often, which isn't always to their betterment. I've
Right.
had local programs where they've had like a dozen severe knee or lower extremity injuries in like a year's time, and that's not there's something's
Right.
off in what you're doing
Right.
if that's the case. And I used to not have these like junior high athletes with like knee pain and stuff. And it's like now
Right.
it's
Right.
like every third kid, maybe every
Yeah.
second, third kid.
Yeah.
So when you spam playing, you get these hyper compensated, hyper adapted bodies to that sport, and maybe the motor skills are good, but like your body ultimately is the foundation from which you express your skill. So you
Yeah.
got to take the time to develop the body, right? You don't. The joke I always tell my hoopers is like, bro, you don't want to be no, you don't want to be all body and no bag, or should be, you don't want to be all bag and no body,
Right. Right.
right? You don't want to be either, really. But like for them, they always trend towards all bag, no body,
Yeah.
And
Do
unless you're somebody
you?
like Michael Jordan or Kobe, and even they eventually had to find
Well,
strength.
they play different sports too, right? So it was a little bit different for them, and they were pretty notorious for working out in the weight
For,
room, right?
for
And so
sure. I mean, eventually, but I'm even pointing out, like, even those genetic, like, unless you're a genetic freak, like a
right.
good mover and
Right.
explode, like, you, which is not 99.999%
Right.
of the population, like, you're going to need to do the right kind of movement therapy and strength and conditioning.
Yeah.
And even those guys had to eventually find their way to it to within their own little 0.00001 part of the population.
Right.
They had to find ways to like do that and excel there to ascend there. So it's ubiquitous.
Yeah. I think it's crazy to see some of this stuff because I think some of the athletes you work with are better genetically, but even then, like their genetics don't compare to like someone like Kobe or Michael Jordan, right? So I think sometimes they don't realize, yeah, your genetics are good maybe compared to me, but you're still so far from those guys, and you do need to be doing these other things to take care of your body, right? So it's cool
Yeah,
that you've seen that too.
for sure. Yeah, it's like that's just kind of like how it goes.
Yeah,
It needs to be well rounded development wise.
yeah. So do you take your guys outside too? Like, is there, a lot of those guys who spend time indoors, do you like I'm very lucky. I have a turf field in our gym. I make those guys kind of warm up outside just to get some sun on their skin. I think they're inside too much.
Yeah, I think getting outside is great. I'm not in love with beach training, but I mean anything that gets people
Oh
out of
yeah.
sun, like as
Yeah.
an adaptation. Like I think doing it here and there is fine, but
Right.
unless you play beach volleyball, like I don't
You
think that.
don't the sand can be bad for you, right? Well, anyways, Coop, man, I know you got a lot going on. I appreciate your time here. What are some ways people can get in touch with you either for online training, in person training, or the nutrition coaching?
Yeah, sorry, I was fiddling with my mic here.
Sure.
But I'm good. Yeah, so basically you can find me at rewireperformance.com. You can get in touch there. You can email me at coop@rewireperformance.com. The numbers on the website too. If you want to follow some of what like expanded thoughts on some of these things, you can always find me at RewireHP on social. And yeah, I think that's about it. I do work with folks both remotely and in person in the Southern California area.
Yeah. All right. Well, Coop, thanks for your time, man. So I'll put all that stuff on the description here on the show notes. And yeah, again, thank you for all that. That was really good stuff, man. Pleasure talking to you.
Hey, I really I know we kind of threaded the needle in a couple ways schedule wise, so I just
Yeah.
appreciate you having me on, and I'm looking forward to connecting next.
All right. We'll talk soon, man. Take care.
Thanks, Troy.
Bye.